What you're looking at here is footage of the first recorded professional surfing event, the 1966 World Surfing Championship. And this is what the same event looks like now. See the difference? But how did we get here? This is the entire history of surfing. It all started way back in 1769 when James Cook was on his third big trip in the South Pacific. Joseph Banks, who was with him, wrote about it in their journal. They were amazed by the Hawaiian way of surfing, known as Hehi Nalu. Surfing was a big deal in Polynesia back then. The chiefs were the best at it, using the finest boards and surfing on the best beaches. Things took a turn in Hawaii, though. Cook tried to kidnap a Hawaiian chief because of a stolen boat, and let's just say the Hawaiians weren't thrilled. That was Cook's last hurrah. After that, it was up to Lieutenant James King to finish the journal. King described how the Hawaiians were expert surfers, riding waves on large wooden planks. Back then, Hawaiian culture was deeply intertwined with surfing. Riding waves on long, hardwood boards was a revered practice, holding a place in society similar to how baseball is regarded in the United States. Chiefs in Hawaii were often the most skilled surfers, showcasing their abilities on the waves as a symbol of their power. When Captain Cook arrived in Hawaii, he entered a world where surfing was steeped in tradition, with roots extending back through centuries of Hawaiian legend and culture. Hawaiians would pray to the gods for protection and strength to face formidable seas. If the conditions were unfavorable, frustrated surfers would seek the help of a kahuna, a priest who would perform a special surfing prayer to the gods for better waves. Even the creation of surfboards was a sacred ceremony, particularly for the upper class. Selecting the right tree for a surfboard involved a ritual offering to the gods, typically a fish placed in the hole left by an uprooted tree. The original surf and turf combo, am I right? Skilled craftsmen were then employed to shape the board. There were three main types: the olo, with a thicker middle and thinner ends; the kaiko, a lengthy board requiring considerable skill; and the alea, a classic longboard. Each type of board required its own unique expertise, further highlighting the intricate relationship between the surfer, their board, and the ocean. Now, after Westerners arrived in Hawaii, everything changed, because there's one thing Westerners liked more than discovering new beaches. It was claiming them. While they were busy exploring and later colonizing the Pacific, they saw the islands as merely tiny dots in a vast ocean. With them came disease, plantations, and a wave of immigration. Local Hawaiians and workers from Asia were put to work on sugar plantations, while Protestant missionaries tried to convert the population from their traditional beliefs to Christianity. This culture shift also meant the suppression of many Hawaiian traditions, including surfing, which was often dismissed as trivial. Surfing only began to make a comeback when Waikiki turned into a tourist hotspot. Wealthy Americans visiting the beach saw locals riding the waves at the already famous surf break Waikiki, and they wanted in on the action. Mark Twain gave it a go in 1866, but didn't exactly nail it. Jack London, on the other hand, tried it, loved it, and even wrote about it in his essay, A Royal Sport, in 1907. In 1908, Alexander Hume Ford set up the Outrigger Canoe and Surfing Club, the first modern organization to promote surfing. The locals in Waikiki started teaching tourists how to surf. They were this cool group of native Hawaiians known as the Waikiki Beach Boys. They'd hang out at the beach, surf all day, and show these rich tourists how to catch waves. It was a whole new world where the usual rules didn't apply, and these beach boys were flipping the script. Jump to 1907, and this guy, George Freeth, gets brought over to California from Hawaii. Why? To show off surfing for a big train line opening. Henry Huntington, the guy behind the railroad and Huntington Beach's namesake, had this idea to make a splash. So Freeth hit the waves at Huntington Beach Pier, showing everyone his moves and even doing some lifeguard stuff. Surfing on the east coast of the U.S. kicked off in 1909 at Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. This is all thanks to Burke Hayward Bridgers and a bunch of surf-loving folks who brought the sport there. In fact, in 2015, North Carolina even gave a big nod to these surfing pioneers by placing a marker at Wrightsville Beach, officially dubbing it the birthplace of East Coast surfing. Talk about making waves in history. What's cool is that Bridgers and his crew are among the first to ride waves on surfboards in the Atlantic Ocean. This was a big deal because until then, if you wanted to surf, you had to be in California, Hawaii, or Australia. But here's the twist. It wasn't just about catching waves. These early 20th century surfers showed that surfing was making a big splash across the US, around the same time hitting California, North Carolina, and then Florida. Meanwhile, over in Australia, the surf scene was just starting to heat up. In 1910, Tommy Walker made a big splash at Manly Beach in Sydney with a 10-foot surfboard he snagged for just $2 at Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. Talk about a bargain! Walker wasn't just a casual surfer. By 1912, he was showing off his skills with several exhibitions in Sydney. But it was Hawaiian Duke Kahanamoku who really put surfing on the Australian map. Duke, an Olympic sprint champ, was touring the eastern states for swimming carnivals in 1914 and 15. He wasn't just fast in the pool, he shattered his own 100-yard world record in Sydney. Then Duke took to the waves, giving jaw-dropping surfing demos at Freshwater, Manly, Dee Why, and Cronulla. His original board? It's now a piece of surfing history, on display at the Freshwater Surf Life Saving Club in Sydney. Fast forward to 1959, and surfing's popularity went through the roof with the release of Gidget. This film, based on surfer Kathy Kohner Zuckerman's life, turned surfing from a cool underground culture into a nationwide craze. Suddenly, surf spots were jam-packed with newbies wanting to catch a wave. Then came the B-movies and surf music like the Beach Boys and Safaris, all riffing on surfing and Southern California beach vibes. These flicks and tunes painted the picture of surfing for most people around the world. In the 1980s, the image of surfers got a fresh coat of paint with mainstream movies showing characters like Jeff Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The original surfers were masters of riding the massive ocean swells on their Olo boards, but tackling a breaking wave over 15 to 20 feet high with old school gear, that was a whole different ballgame, hardly ever tried back in the day. Fast forward to the 1950s and 1960s, and board design started getting seriously innovative, and suddenly those big fast waves weren't so out of reach. The first spot to gain fame for big wave surfing was Waimea Bay on Oahu's North Shore. This place was notorious. It was fast, fierce, and tough as nails. As chronicled in the movie Riding Giants, the first successful ride at Waimea happened in October 1957. Once surfers conquered Waimea, it kicked off a global hunt for monster waves and a dedicated group of thrill-seekers who lived to surf the giants. Meanwhile, in 1961, the United States Surfing Association, or USSA, was born, marking the first steps towards professional surfing contests. Around this time, surfing started to evolve from just riding waves to focusing more on style and flair. Now, defining a professional surfer isn't straightforward, as the scene is pretty diverse. Mainly, there are three ways surfers make a living: sponsorships, competing in surf contests, and being social media influencers. Usually, pro surfers juggle all three, but some excel in just one area. So when did professional surfing start? Well, if we say a pro surfer is someone who earns their bread from surfing, excluding teaching, then we're looking at around 1959. That's when the first West Coast surfing competitions kicked off in Huntington Beach, California. Before that, there were loads of amateur competitions, right from the ancient Hawaiians who'd bet on surfing contests to various types of races involving paddling out to a buoy and catching a wave back to the shore. Surfing's come a long way from its humble beginnings, evolving into a sport with its own legends, culture, and a global following. Before the 1970s, it was rare for anyone to make a living solely from surfing, unless they were also teaching, designing boards, or creating surfwear. But as seen in the documentary Busting Down the Door, the real game changer was contest surfing, especially in Hawaii. The North Shore of Oahu became the global hotspot for top-tier surfing performances. However, when Australian and South African surfers joined the Californians who had been flocking to Hawaii for nearly 2 decades, things got tense. There was friction not just between American and international surfers, but more significantly between the local Hawaiians and the newcomers, or haoles. By the 1990s, surfers were tackling colossal waves all over the world. some even hitting the 40, 50, or 60-foot mark. Big wave surfing split into two camps, paddle in and tow in. Some waves are so huge and fast that paddling into them is nearly impossible, so surfers began using boats and personal watercraft to tow them into position. Even though Duke Kahanamoku had wanted surfing to be part of the Olympics all the way back in 1920, that wouldn't become possible until almost a century later. Surfing was scheduled to debut in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. However, the COVID-19 pandemic threw a wrench into the works, postponing the games to 2021. When the Olympics finally happened in 2021, surfers from around the world, including some from the World Surf League and amateur ranks, got to show their stuff at Surigasaki Beach in Chiba, Japan. The past century of surfing has been marked by technological breakthroughs that have often reshaped the sport. Surfers themselves have been at the forefront of developing, tweaking, or adopting new technologies to access waves and spots that were once deemed unreachable. In surfing, it's not just the surfboard that's important. Secondary gear like the wetsuit is almost as crucial. The advent of the wetsuit was a game changer, opening up chilly waters across the globe that were previously too cold for surfing. Similarly, the introduction of polystyrene in surfboards or the addition of fins to boards by Tom Blake in 1935 were pivotal moments. These technological advancements have continually made surfing more accessible, affordable, easier, and have elevated the level of performance in the sport. Surfing's transformation has been fueled by its expansion beyond being a tropical warm water or developed world activity. With mass-produced fiberglass boards, quality wetsuits, off-road vehicles, and affordable international travel, surfing's geographic reach exploded. Surfing hotspots popped up in regions once considered unsuitable or unknown for the sport. Surfers began to introduce the sport and its equipment to local communities in even the most remote parts of the world. By the 21st century, surfing had reached nearly every wave-rich country, involving local communities in places far and wide. Yet despite this global spread, there are still untouched surf breaks in remote or dangerous parts of the world or around uninhabited islands. Where do you think the next great surfing frontier might be? Could there be perfect waves waiting on some obscure ice-covered shore in the Arctic, or hidden among the untouched islands of the South Pacific? The possibilities are as endless as the ocean itself.